Hello, hello. It's Colin and Rachel again. Welcome back. We have a little bit of a different format for you today. We're going to talk about things that have been going on in our world in the last week. Mainly the fact that we went to the EOS conference last week. Got to see a whole bunch of people, high energy, huge attendance. It was insane.
Yeah, it was massive. There was a lot of people, a lot of people.
It's like a good example of how to run a good conference. But if you're not familiar with EOS, it's entrepreneurial operating system. It's a way to run your business very efficiently. And we run on EOS here. We love working with EOS companies because it's a way to get your ducks in a row pretty fast.
Yep.
So, I mean, what were your overall impressions for EOS conference, Colin?
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, we're huge fans of EOS, generally speaking. I feel like it's a good sign for a company that they know there's a better way, right? I think we're all a little bit as entrepreneurs kind of start down a path where you're feeling really bold and confident and you're willing to bet on yourself, and all those things are great. But the sign of maturity within a business is kind of saying, like, there's people better than me at certain things. And if I can just go find those people, find this framework, I can become a better company than I could by myself. And so love, people who are in EOS and love the concept of EOS. And it was our first time, right? I mean, we hadn't
Yeah.
done that before. So that was exciting.
Yeah, we
Um,
actually got to
yeah,
meet
so
each other in person for the first time.
I know. Yeah. So that's crazy. I mean, we had never met in person. We've been on many, many hours of Zoom calls and every other kind of call. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was cool. Neat to meet each other. Um, but yeah, so, general impressions about the EOS show. I would say it was a very well run show. It was a bit of a Swiss watch. I mean, that's one of the main tenets of EOS is like you start on time, you end on time, you stick to your agenda. And so they really put their money where their mouth was in terms of delivering a conference that ran that way. It was so many people at times that made it a little chaotic. There was like lines for breakout sessions, and it kind of created this a little bit of like a panic. Am I going to be able to get the breakout session that I really want? So a lot of like rushing around and kind of sense of urgency, which, I think took away a little bit from being able to interact and just like
Mhm.
comfortably meet new friends and chat and between breakouts.
Right.
But generally, just love being surrounded by small businesses that, run on that type of platform and think that sort of way.
Yeah. I know I love getting the chance to connect with other integrators, which if you're not familiar with that term, the EOS is big on visionary and integrator relationship where the visionary sets the vision and the tone of the company, and then the integrator makes that vision come to life. Um, and so more on the operations side, and I was nerding out with fellow integrators all over the place and talking about operations and how to manage your people and all of that. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, I went to the visionary visionary meetup kind of thing, for lack of a better term. I forget what they called it. Um, but the guy was like, "Yeah, are there any integrators in here?" And nobody really said anything. And he was like, "All right, so now we ran off those types. Let's have some fun." So it is fun to see this. That's a huge part of EOS as well, is like that interplay between the organized, disciplined type, who's typically your integrator, and the bold idea, big personality, frequently big thinking kind of visionary types. And so, yeah, it's fun when you've got a conference that has both, but they also kind of take off in their own directions sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, we did a lot of the data related sessions because that is something we're very passionate about. You went to one or two of them and I went to a separate one. I can't
Yeah,
remember
I
how many.
went to two and maybe a third that you could kind of argue was in that same data vein.
Nice. What were your takeaways from your sessions?
Yeah, so a couple of really big ones. Number one, I want to toot our own horn a little bit. We're on our game. So the couple of sessions that I went to were about, they were being run by integrators. So they were, these are integrators who are helping companies implement EOS.
You
And
mean
so they're,
implementers?
I'm sorry, I said integrators, run by
I
some
get them confused all the
implementers.
time.
Everybody does. Yeah. So it's just the life of it. Implementers who they're hired to professionally implement EOS, help companies run it better, be the facilitator in their big meetings, that sort of thing. And so what's cool about that is when it's an implementer up there talking about what kind of data approach that you need, and it's similar to what we always advocate, it's really fulfilling to say like, okay, the people who have seen a bunch of EOS companies have the same experience. We've seen a lot of EOS companies. We've seen a lot of other companies who aren't on EOS. And so it was great to get that validated. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one big takeaway that I had was, so Dawn Clark, she talked about as an implementer and really helping people with the data scorecard side of their business, helping really drive like more clarity, which becomes better performance. She talked a lot about like less is more, and really remembering that like when they give you a range of how many measurables or like scorecard elements you should be fighting with everything you have to get to the low end of that range. Like you don't, if they say 5 to 8, like, or 3 to 7, go 3, go
Yep.
5. Don't go all the way to the high end. And so that's really significant. But she also, one of the things I love that she talked about was she used the analogy of the movie Moneyball. I don't know, Rachel, did you ever see Moneyball?
Mm-mm.
Okay. It's a sports movie, so I figured you didn't. But it has Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, and it's about the Oakland Athletics, and they're the baseball team in Oakland. And they basically had no budget compared to the big like Yankees and Red Sox and the other teams they were going to have to compete with. And they basically realized like trying to compete on their terms is hopeless. If we try to outspin them, it'll never work. Our only option is to come up with a more creative way to approach this. And they ended up calling it Moneyball. And Moneyball basically said, we want to win the World Series, which means we have to get in the playoffs. To get in the playoffs, we have to win a lot of games. To win a lot of games, we have to score a lot of runs. To score a lot of runs, we have to keep getting on base. And so they kind of walked backward from that end goal and found the ultimate lead measure that they felt like they could control and be creative about how to achieve it, which was how to get people on base. And so it was really wild. I mean, they basically used all data metrics back. This is like before sports metrics had really exploded. It was still kind of in its infancy. And they basically realized that like if we obsess over getting on base, that gives us the best chance to win. And for them not having a budget, they had to say like, what are all the ways you can get on base that the Yankees don't care about?
Mm.
And it was literally like, I got hit by the ball. So I don't know if you know this about baseball, but you're standing up there to bat. You can
Yep.
either make contact with the ball, right? And it stays in play. You get to run and get on base. You can get hit with the ball, or you can stand there and watch bad pitches. And when they throw the fourth ball, you get to take base. So what they obsessed over was what players can we get who maybe don't have big home run numbers. They're not doing flashy hitting, but they still get on base, or they get hit with the ball, or they have a great eye. And so they don't swing at bad balls, and they end up getting on base too. And so they essentially broke the code. And so anyway, that was a huge breakthrough of like thinking about our businesses and that money ball. I'm going to use this a lot when we talk to our clients to kind of get them to think about, start with the end in mind, go all the way back to the beginning, and then let's be as creative as possible on how to actually deliver that result.
I love that so much because it's a great example of we talk about, or you hear people talk about lead versus lag measures. It's important to keep both in mind because the lag
Yep.
measure for them is we want to win the World Series. Like that's what matters to us. And then work your way back into what is your critical unit, you might say, is something that we talk about a lot, which was getting on
Absolutely.
base.
Yep.
Because that's
Exactly.
something that we play with when we're developing our own scorecards because it's always a journey. We don't have it all figured out. And so we've gone through the journey of at first we were using lag measures because like, hey, what really matters to us is this, like maybe a number of new clients or something like that. And so that's the end all be all goal. But when you're only looking at lag measures, it's hard to know if you're off track, what to do about it.
Yep.
Versus if you
Exactly.
back it all the way up, say, well, maybe we want to do this many reach outs is a good lead measure for us. You kind of have to have both lead and lag measures in mind because you could, if you have the wrong lead measures, you could be really busy but not achieve your end all be all goal. And so I like having the
Yeah.
combination of the two.
And to that point, like I love what you just said. There's a danger in being in this quarterly environment, which is what EOS advocates, and kind of, we want to teach our clients like be able to zoom out. Let's look at the goals for the year. Let's look at those lag measures. Let's look at them quarterly, and then break it down to maybe monthly. The danger in that, like you said, is if you don't have lead measures you're obsessing over, then you kind of are like holding out hope that in the
Yeah.
end you'll get the result you want. It'd be like the Oakland A's, like just showing up and doing the same thing and being like, well, fingers crossed we'll make the playoffs. Fingers crossed we might be able to win a World Series, instead of bringing back to the beginning and saying like, today, what can I control that will actually make us more successful? And that's huge. I mean, for every business.
Mm-hmm. Other things that we were talking about in my session is how do you develop scorecard measures that speak to not data people. So
I love
it was
that.
it was a question, it was an audience question. Like, well, I work with a lot of marketing people, a lot of creatives. They're like, you can't quantify what we're doing. How do you how like what's your advice to these people? And their answer was a lot about qualitative measures instead of
Mm,
quantitative measures. And like, how are you embracing customer feedback? Even when you have a formal survey that you can do,
yep.
great. But they're also like, anytime a client gives us feedback, even just in a casual conversation, we take note of that and that counts as your qualitative measure. So that because, not everyone fills out a survey all the time.
Yeah.
But I loved
Yeah, that's
that
great. I mean,
question.
that's a good challenge to kind of think through because, like you said, not everyone is wired for data. Not everyone is a Rachel or a Colin and
Yeah.
loves the data and the and getting in the weeds. But and that's, we've always talked about that. That's a huge part of what we try to deliver with our business is I want to design, whether identify as a visionary type in EOS terminology or a creative or just a big thinker, or you're like, hey, I'm a big picture relationship person, whatever your terminology is for it. We want to make sure we have dashboards and that we speak to you in a language that makes sense to you. And I mean, this whole game, in a lot of ways, comes back to the personal side. It's like, so in other words, my ability to work with my team, my ability to engage with my clients, like so much of that comes back to the interpersonal connectivity that we all have. And so we need to make sure that our communication, you wouldn't go into a sales process and say like, I only speak the way I speak. Let them figure it out. You wouldn't get deals. So you'd figure that out pretty quickly. Same way with our dashboards, same way with our metrics, same way with our data.
hmm And one of the things that's so key is your dashboards, your data, your scorecard should be evolving all the time. Like we change ours every 2 months, I feel like. Because as soon as there's
Yep.
a piece of information on your scorecard that doesn't seem critical to you, we got to swap it out.
Yeah. Yeah. That was actually, Dawn talked about that too, of like when you have that metric that you keep showing up and it keeps missing and missing and that happens to the point that people aren't even really trying that hard anymore. It's kind of, that's a huge red flag of like, wait a minute, do we actually care about this? Like if we're not willing to identify the underlying flaw in why we're missing this metric, if we don't care enough to do that, that's a huge sign that maybe we don't care about this metric at all.
hmm I was actually just talking with someone yesterday about rocks and they're having a hard time with someone not really buying into the rocks. And my response back was, that's either that you have the wrong rock, if it's not agreed upon, like, or a quarterly goal or whatever you want to call them. If it's not agreed upon that this is what we should be focusing on for the betterment of the company organization, then you probably have the wrong rocks. Or maybe the wrong milestones or subtasks related to it. That's a larger conversation, because if you allow one person to just say, this rock isn't that important to me, I'm not going to focus on it, it kind of dilutes the importance of all the other rocks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And the whole concept, right? I mean, that's where a lot of the start on time, end on time, all the elements is kind of a form of discipline.
yeah.
And as we know about discipline, like if you don't exhibit it, it fails to exist. So it's kind of one of those things. The same deal could be said with your rocks. If you're going through the motions and you're allowing rocks to exist that aren't really being followed, then are any of your rocks real?
Right. It kind of goes to that phrase of, like, people don't rise to the level of your expectations, they fall to the level of what's accepted. And
Yeah.
so if you're
Yeah.
accepting, yeah.
I've heard that put another way, which just is applicable. If you don't rise to the level of your, I don't know, maybe it was like, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Oh, yes.
So it's the same thing, right? It's like if you invest in the discipline, the framework that you know will drive results, then the results will come. They may not be exactly what you hope for, but the results will come. But if you try to look beyond the framework, the systems, the process, and like let's just focus on the big, then all of a sudden everything starts falling apart.
Yeah. That's one of the key points of having EOS, is that you have the systems in place. So it's not, it makes the discipline easier. It's not all on
Yes.
you to, like, hound on people, like, you're not following the system. Um,
Yeah.
the system is
I
there.
love that. And that reminds me of, so one of the other takeaways I had was this idea of having your departmental rocks that
Mm,
flow up to the leadership level rocks. And so that's a really important component as well. And you touched on, I wanted to piggyback on, you touched on like the buy-in element. So one of the things that I know Dawn talked about, and one of the things that's really, really relevant when you're in this world and trying to make it real is, are the teams engaged in the rock setting process?
yep.
And do those departmental rocks flow up toward the company? Do the scorecards and the rocks at the departmental level flow up to the rocks and the scorecard at the leadership level? Because otherwise we're trying to go in two different directions. We're never going to get anywhere. Right. And so making sure those things are all going up. And that's a big part when I tell people about EOS. It's really about the way it engages your team.
Yeah.
And if they don't feel heard, if they don't feel like they've got a seat at the table to have those conversations and push back against your ideas, then they're not really engaged. So that's, if your rocks and scorecards don't represent that, then your implementation has not actually been successful.
Yeah. One of the fastest ways to ensure that a rock doesn't get completed is for it to be established by leadership and then pushed on someone else. Be like, here, we've decided
Yes.
that this is important. Now you implement it. If they don't see inherently that it is important for the company and worth doing, it's not going to get done.
It's never going to happen. Yep.
Cool. Well, we've veered off a little bit. This is what happens when Colin and Rachel just get talking. What else is going on in our world? Anything else? Any big ahas that we've had in the last week?
Yeah. So I think this will be relatively quick compared to breaking down all of EOS and the conference. But, one of the things that I'm excited about, we're working with a new client that's in the construction industry, and it's a project-based business, which many of our businesses we work with are project-based. And we've kind of gone down this path with other companies, but I just wanted to highlight the focal point for maybe somebody who's earlier in their journey. When you do bidding or estimating or kind of forecasting a project on the front end, like let's say in your sales cycle, you're kind of estimating like, what's it going to take to get this project done? And then it's not until later on in the project when you start to see reality hit And what always happens, and I own project-based business too, you end up, and it's never like you're pleasantly surprised the project was way easier and cheaper than you expected. It's
If only.
always the other way around. It is always the other way around, right? And so, what we're trying to advocate for, implement in our clients, is to tighten that feedback loop. Like, we need that shortest amount of time possible. So like, the lessons I'm learning today will be incorporated into the bidding process tomorrow. That's kind of the mindset. And so that's true and so impactful when you've got volatile costs we've all experienced over the past 3 or 4 years. Like, cost of goods are going crazy, labor costs are going crazy, rent's going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
How fast are you incorporating that? So that's just a kind of a challenge everybody to think about. Like, how fast is that feedback loop getting back around to empower better decision making?
Mm-hmm. And especially on the sales side, because a lot of times once you pitch a price, that is going to be the price. So the faster you
Yes,
can have that feedback loop, the smoother your sales process goes. And at the end of the
yeah,
day, your profitability.
very much so. Yep.
Cool. Well, we've got another conference coming up in about a month. Well, less than a month now. We're going to be at CoachCon for Strategic Coach. Do you have some things to say about that?
Yeah, no, I'm so excited about this. We've never been to CoachCon because CoachCon, this is their first one.
First
So,
annual.
first annual, I mean, they've got like an all-star team of people who are going to be speaking. Their keynotes include Chris Voss, who Never Split the Difference, a negotiation book. I actually met somebody the other day who hadn't read it yet, and I was like, read it now. It's one of those where you like grab a hold of somebody and you're like, do it. You have to.
Uh-huh.
So Chris Voss and his book Never Split the Difference, amazing. Kathy Ireland, who is an ultra successful entrepreneur, for anybody who hasn't been keeping up with her for the past 20 years, she has become a absolute magnate in the home finishings, furnishings kind of realm. So those are two of their keynote speakers. I mean, powerhouse, ultra successful people. I'm really excited about, and I'm also excited. I've heard CoachCon has some amazing sponsors.
Oh,
So
really?
what have you heard about their sponsors?
It feels very bizarre to say that we are a sponsor. Like, that is so cool that we get to be a sponsor at their first ever conference. Man,
Yep.
I'm so excited. We're gonna have a booth.
And you're going to meet so many coach people. And so for anybody who doesn't know Strategic Coach, like, I feel like Strategic Coach and EOS are this perfect symbiotic relationship. You go to Strategic Coach and it's training specifically for the entrepreneur, and they've kind of branched out with some support programs, but it's really guided around being for the entrepreneur. And EOS is about building the framework within your team and your company. And it's hilarious because Strategic Coach tells you, like, you're this special, one-off, unique, individual. You should just build a company that works around your special power. And then you go to EOS and they kind of go like, yeah, okay, visionary. Sounds cool. If you go telling the team that, chaos will break loose. So let's have an integrator, because then you're going to have every person in every department saying, but I'm special too. Here's what I want to do today. And
Uh-huh.
so it's this kind of like, this perfect symbiotic relationship where I know a lot of people, I mean, 80+% of coach clients run EOS because they
Wow, I didn't know it
realize
was
it
that
is.
high.
Oh yeah, it's like, I mean, if we just win and we're in a session and we say, "Put your hand up if you run EOS," I mean, it might be almost every single person sometimes. And so it's because we've all realized that EOS is such an important tool to get us where we want to be. And it's engaging the team in a way that makes sense to the team. Again, it goes back to that like communication engagement. But Strategic Coach talks about, your unique ability, teaches you to think bigger. Like in one of Dan Sullivan's books is 10x is easier than 2x. So it's this idea that, like, kind of like the Oakland A's did, they thought differently. They didn't just try to get a little better at the same old thinking. And
Mhm.
that's kind of that notion of 10x is easier than 2x. But Dan Sullivan also, who he was the founder of Strategic Coach, he shot to fame somewhat again, or another round or wave of it when COVID was hitting, because he had a really good kind of white paper that he had written that was basically about, it was called like the Scary Times Handbook or something.
Hmm.
And he had written it unrelated to COVID, like years before that. But people were like finding it and sharing it. I was hearing about it from people who didn't even know what Strategic Coach was, even though I was already in Coach. And anyway, it was a really cool situation where somebody kind of preemptively thought about, like, when you're in a really tough time, what's the mindset, what's the approach. So that's what I love. I mean, Coach people are great. It's awesome clients. We know now a lot of the people who work at Coach, they're fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we met
CoachCon's going
several
to
of
be
them
fun.
at EOS conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were there. EOS is going to be one of the other sponsors at CoachCon. Again, these two are tied at the hip. In fact, Gino Wickman, who founded, I mean, you and I saw from stage, he was one of the keynotes at EOS. He's the
Uh-huh.
creator of Traction in EOS. He talked about, well, the other day I was in Strategic Coach. He's like, on Tuesday when I was in my Strategic Coach class. So he's still in it. They're all still very tied at the hip. And so, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, over in Nashville, I think it's May 8th and 9th.
That's
We'll be
right.
there on the
Yeah, and it's
7th.
not too late. They're squeezing a couple extra people in if anybody sees this and wants to sign up. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
It'll be a little bit more manageable number of people compared to EOS. EOS had like 2,000 people.
Yeah, and
It
this will
was
be like
wild.
maybe 400 or something. So
Right.
yeah, it's going to be, yeah, and that's, to me, that's part of what I'm excited about, is like I felt like we went into a giant crowd in EOS and then came back knowing a small handful of people. I'm hopeful that in this smaller format, as they're getting started, and already knowing a lot of clients, so like I'm going to have, I don't even know, 10, 15, 20, maybe more people that I know that we're going to run into. And then my business partner is going to be there. A couple of our clients are going to be there who are all members of Coach. And so like this spider web of network is, and what's so cool is you're in with Coach, you're talking with people exactly like when you're at EOS. No one's trying to get anything from you. They're not trying to hard pitch you on something, or it's not a networking for business kind of environment. It's really like connecting to win together kind of vibe.
Mhm.
So it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's a good opportunity to brush off my small talk skills that I exercised at EOS. So I'm just trying to keep that vibe going until May so that I don't have to start back up from scratch. Like, just keep the small talk going. I'm an
That's
extrovert
right.
though, so I actually like it.
Yeah,
I'm
and
a
I'm the opposite. I'm an introvert. I've just been on a whole lot of podcasts, so
yeah.
I kind of have learned, like, just wind me up. I have to be ready. You just like hit a button, and I'm like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
But no, it'll be great. Again, easygoing people. Like, part of what we love about working with entrepreneurs, like just
Yeah.
great, easygoing, down to earth people.
If you're going to be there, if you know someone who's going to be there, let us know. We would love to meet up with you. And we'll
Love
have
it.
a booth so you can come by and see us.
That's right.
All right. Well, that was just a new format for us, just more chit chatty. I kind of like it. Maybe we'll
Yeah, it was
keep up
fun.
with this in the future.
I love it.
Um,
Let's do it.
all right. Well, that's what we got. Nice seeing you. And we'll be back again next week.
Next week. See you guys.
Bye.